Today I'm looking at some pitch shift pedals, and I have the Lekato Pitch Box here. This is a very budget pitch shifting pedal, and the industry standard, the Digitech Drop. So this one goes closer to $200. This one is closer to $50. Big difference in price, but does the little pitch box hold up as an affordable alternative, or does it not? We're going to see. Now, I don't expect it to be quite as good, but if it does a decent job, maybe it's good enough for you, and we'll see what the difference is in sound. I've also got my Squier Jazzmaster baritone here. This is a 30-inch baritone. It's tuned to drop D and octave below, so we can test out a D standard riff pitch shifted down an octave versus a D riff naturally down an octave. So does it make a big difference? Do you need a baritone guitar, or should you get a pitch pedal? Let's just listen to the guitar without any pitch effects. So let's check out the Digitech Drop first. I've got this at -5. Now let's go over to the pitch box. I've got that also at -5. Well, it's not the biggest difference in the world. Now, I do detect a little more latency with the pitch box, as well as a slightly less clear quality, especially when you're sustaining a note. It's not night and day, and you may not hear a big difference, especially with distortion. So let's go on over to a clean channel, which is going to give us the ability to hear a little more clearly what's going on with the pitch effect. Here I am on a clean channel, starting with the drop first. So I think it's pretty clear there. There's a certain warbliness to the pitch box. It's not certainly as solid and clear sounding as the drop. Now, it doesn't sound terrible, and I don't think it's unusable, but it does have a slightly chorusy kind of warbly sound to it that you may hate and you may think makes it totally unusable, or you may not really care about, especially if you like to play with a chorus pedal afterwards anyways. Let's check these both out an octave down and see if there's any real difference there. This is the drop pedal, and if you listen closely to this chord, there's definitely some tracking, I guess you could say bugginess. There's a tracking noise that you can hear the pitch change with the chord. Let's check out the pitch box again. Well, it doesn't have the same tracking sound. However, it's just warbly all the time. It seems to be a little more noticeable on some notes than others. So it's really your call as to whether or not you think the pitch box sounds good for what you would be using it for. I think the latency is pretty good. It's not too noticeable. I do think it's got a little more latency than the drop, but it's not unusably slow or anything. And it doesn't have a whole lot of tracking artifacts that don't sound like chorus, if that makes sense. The whole thing kind of sounds like a tracking artifact, but not in a totally weird digital way. It's just got this kind of chorusy, warbly sound that, if you don't mind, is fine. And if it's going to drive you nuts, then you're probably not going to like it. It's not a super clear pedal, but it also doesn't sound like glitchy and digital. So it's not the worst thing in the world. It's also got a bigger range. The drop goes down an octave. The pitch box can go down 2 octaves or up 2 octaves. So here it is, down 2 octaves. Let's go up 2 octaves. That's kind of nasty. Kind of weird playing a baritone guitar and having it sound like that. Well, it's not the best sound in the world, but it doesn't sound totally terrible. It's just, it's a lot. It's a lot of whatever it is. Let's do something more reasonable. This is only up 5 steps. See, the thing is, I wouldn't hear that and necessarily immediately jump to a pitch shifting. It does kind of have that timbre of pitch shifting. It does sound kind of funny, especially when you get really far away. But at the less extreme settings, it doesn't sound too bad. It just sounds like you've got a chorus pedal on. Now, if you're into kind of lo-fi stuff or shoegaze, I think it could probably work just fine. It's not the best pitch shifter for metal. That's what we have the drop for, if you really need it. No pitch shifter is going to be perfect either, and we'll come to that later. Even when you get into a nicer pitch shifter like the drop, it's fine in a pinch, and it works for some applications, but I wouldn't use it all the time like for my main rhythm guitar. At least I wouldn't. I always prefer to actually put the guitar in the correct tuning, get the correct guitar with the correct scale length. That's important. But either way, this does a good job. The drop is a solid pedal. Not perfect, but it's good. Pitch shifting, remember, is one of the hardest things to do. The Pitch Box, so far, it's really not doing a bad job for the price. Let's check out the harmony feature, which is just basically a dry wet blend. This will also probably point out if there's any latency. See, weird as that is, it's kind of cool. And you can hear the both the tracking and the latency is pretty good there. Try an octave down. And then there's also another mode on here that is detune, and I don't think it doesn't follow these pitch steps that are written on the pedal, but will more or less detune, sort of a fine-tuning thing. Let's just go through that. that may be the most musical for my taste, at least. It's kind of just a customizable width on your chorus, how out of tune the chorus is, which kind of changes the chorus speed, and it sounds nice. I don't have any issues with that sound, and you can get kind of more or less depth in your chorus with that. You can't control the blend or anything else, but that is a pretty nice sounding little chorus, I think. So this does have some nice extra features that the drop does not, but is the pitch shifting on its own as good? No, but I didn't expect it to be. But let's check out a little more high gain riffage and see if we can hear it more clearly there, and see if there's a big difference. It depends entirely on what you would need to use it for, I guess. If it's just a small part in a song, maybe it doesn't matter that it's perfect. If it's something that you're going to use a lot and use for like a whole song and kind of exposed as your main rhythm track, maybe it's not, but I'll let you be the judge. That's only 2 half steps down, and the difference between them there is not so noticeable. Let's take them a whole octave down and see if it's a little more obvious then. Starting with the drop. It's definitely there, but it's kind of subtle, and you may or may not hear a whole lot of difference. I can hear definitely the clarity on the drop is just the notes are a little more stable. The distortion sounds clearer, because when you've got that sort of warbliness going on, it's going to also make your distortion sound a little more muddy and less clear, especially, I think, with chords. You know, I don't think it's unusable at all. I mean, I don't think it sounds as good as the drop, but once again, I think the summary of my whole opinion is obvious here. It's not as good, but it's usable, and I don't think that chorusiness to me is a total deal breaker. If I had the option, I'd go with the drop, but if, I'm on a budget, then the Pitch Box works pretty well for what it does. I think it's not bad. The tracking doesn't give me any major issues, and the latency, while it may not be quite as tight as the drop, is not unusable. And even for really fast stuff, I'm trying to kind of trip it up, and it doesn't really mess me up, so that's good. to play that way all the time, would I love it? No, I would be a little frustrated with it. But for an occasional thing, like I feel like most people are using pitch shifters for as an occasional effect, it's not so bad. Let's try the harmony on a little lead. Don't quite love that. It's a little messy, but could be cool for a fake harmony part. The last thing for these is just how well do they stack up against the real deal. That is, I'm going to take a riff in regular D, transpose it down an octave with the pedals versus how it sounds actually an octave down with no pitch shifting on a baritone. Let's just start with the real deal. Digitech drop. They don't do it perfectly, but they are kind of close enough, especially if you tweak with your amp settings and your boost, to get it good enough if you just need a small part. You know, obviously, if you want to write a whole album down an octave, you're probably going to want to buy a guitar that does that. It's also kind of funny playing up an octave and transposing it down. But these do a pretty good job, and I think the Pitch Box holds up pretty much well enough against the drop. Same comments as before. But let's try one more riff. They don't have the same clarity as actually tuning your guitar down an octave, but they work in a pinch. Neither one of them is perfect. I think your best results with something like this are going to be keeping it to less extreme than an octave, unless you're using it in the background as a fake bass guitar, like at the Graves live performances. If we're just taking it down a step, for example, it's not quite so noticeable. In conclusion, I think the Pitch Box is a pretty good value for what it offers. It does a respectable job as long as you're okay with the sound quality it gives, which is a little bit warbly. But otherwise, if you're okay with that and or you like some of the other features, I don't think it's a bad bet, and it's quite cheap. I'll put up the final price, but I think these go for around $40. I've seen them for around that. So it's a pretty cheap little mini pedal. It's does a good job. The latency is not really anything so terrible that it messes my playing up. Don't expect world-class performance even out of something like the Drop. It's not going to replace having a guitar in the right tuning if you're really doing, the most extreme high-end guitar work. It's going to work pretty darn good in a pinch, and you could play a whole song with it. And I know there's plenty of bands who use them live, and it saves them from having to change guitars, and that's great, and it's doable. And if you keep it within just a couple of half steps of your actual guitar's tuning, probably nobody will ever notice. If you're doing that a lot live, you probably want to get the Drop. It's, better suited for that. It's clearer tone, especially if you're doing with multiple guitars. That kind of messiness is going to stack up. But as an effect, certainly as something to play around with and have fun with, the Pitch Box is a pretty cool little pedal, and it's cheap. And the detune function, I think, is the only thing that I would probably actually bother using on a recording. I've got a bunch of other chorus pedals anyways, but I think that's something that I would say sounds pretty much as good as anything, good enough to record with. Would I use the pitch shift to record with? Not really. I have better things. The Hypertune plugin from Polychrome DSP is killer. I own it. That works really well. In some ways, it works better than the Drop. In some ways, the Drop sounds better. It kind of depends on the individual case. They both are, I would say, on par with each other, but the plugin is far cheaper. So if you want something for digital recording, I would definitely look into Hypertune from Polychrome DSP. That's a killer plugin, and it's going to be cheaper than either of these options, and basically work better as well. Though there's some cases where I found that the Drop in side-by-side testing had an edge, but we're talking about edging here on the internet, so there's only so far you want to go with that. I hope you've enjoyed this and learned something, and this has been educational, informative, insightful, life-changing, mind-breaking, and as always, please like and smash subscribe and smash like and come back for more videos on cool gear stuff, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up. Ring the notification bell. I love you. See you in the next video.